Round Table Oath. Bjornwolf strode into the great hall. At its center stood the Round Table, a massive stone disk ringed with 13 thrones, each one identical. He stopped at the nearest chair and stood before it. Having no blade at his side, he removed his Sildathnidal disruptor pistol and laid it carefully upon the stone. Wulfgar followed, placing his Crozius on the table with solemnity, aligning it with the carved skull at its center. Flotward Edric was already waiting, seated in a throne. His armor dripped rainwater. He had come straight from orbit ahead of the Manifold Dawn delegation. Around the table sat Captains Sinwulf, Grimhelm, and Tunbald, with Gastward Cuthhelm completing the 7 revenants present. Deacon Absalon entered and placed his rod of office upon the table. He almost never laid down the Aquila, but the Round Table was a place to bury enmity and division. If even Wulfgar would set aside his Crozius here, Absalon reasoned, then his own staff could rest in such company. "See your one hand short again," Grimhelm grunted. Edric lifted both augmetic arms with a sly grin. "Ahead of you by half, brother." His hands had been lost in battle. The new augmetics were artificer's work from Osric, not yet painted blue, for now they gleamed iron gray. Through the doors came the sound of echoing footsteps. 2 warriors of the first company entered first, dressed in standard Muck-4 plate rather than their cataphractia armor, leading the delegation from Manifold Dawn. Admiral Dragovich entered first. Tall, lean, with a heavy-set jaw. Almost as tall as the Astartes, he carried himself with suspicion and stiffness. Behind him came Preacher Lucia Gratner, her eyes sweeping the chamber with caution before she caught sight of Absalon. And then Bjornwolf. She smiled faintly and gave him a nod. At their rear came the Sarathar Arbites delegation, Warrant Officer Dornstall, Lexmec Ranjan, and Captain Dayananda Mandalik. The latter gazed in open wonder at the vaulted hall, stepping aside instinctively to avoid the steady drip of water from a leaking arch. Admiral Dragovich looked back at his companions, then at the table where each throne was identical, without head or high seat. He turned to Bjornwolf. "Where do guests sit?" he demanded. "Anywhere you like," Grimhelm rumbled. "The window seat's comfortable if you don't mind a draft, but avoid the fireplace rug. Smells of wet dog." Dragovich stared at him as though confronted by a barbarian fresh from the wastes. "We are people of note. We are to be treated with honor." Sinwulf leaned forward in his chair. "You stand in the meeting hall of the Void Revenants Fortress Monastery, and you are not dead. Consider your honor already higher than most. Take a seat or go stand on the parapet, but it's raining out." Deacon Absalon rose smoothly, his voice soft but cutting through the tension. "All are equal at this table, Lord. It is round. No head, no seat above another. Those who sit here speak as equals." The Admiral's lip curled. He turned to Lucia. "We are among barbarians." Lucia's smile was calm. "Yes, barbarians who destroyed the renegade Ministorum fleet of Manifold Dawn. I believe we have a saying, Admiral. Respect is earned, not gifted." Dragovich sagged a little at that, his stiff pride dented. He glanced at the Arbites contingent. "If all are equal, why are these here? They are Sarethans, not of your world, nor mine." "They have a place here," Bjornwolf said, his tone dismissive. The Admiral finally chose a seat, lowering himself heavily into the cleanest-looking throne. Preacher Lucia sat beside him, turning her chair slightly sideways with easy grace. Dornstall dropped into a chair with a flask in hand, Ranjan seating himself stiffly at his side. Captain Mandalik stroked his beard and found an empty throne between Edric and Grimhelm. The latter made a point of wiping the wet stone with an already sodden cloth before gesturing gallantly for Mandalik to sit, flashing him a grin wide as a scar. Lucia's eyes narrowed at the sight of the final, empty throne. Footsteps echoed. A man in a black longcoat and peaked cap entered the hall, his uniform dirty and disheveled. Commissar Angaran, who had led the prison revolt aboard the Space Hulk. He gave the table a curt nod, then took the 13th seat in silence, eyes full of suspicion as they scanned the others. Admiral Dragovich shifted uncomfortably. "And why exactly is this? A mere commissar of the Astra Militarum? We are in the Reach. If this meeting is to be official, should there not be someone of flag rank?" The commissar looked back at him without a word. Bjornwolf plucked a shard of splinter rifle glass from his battered pauldron and dropped it on the stone floor with a crystalline tink. A servo skull darted from a recess, retrieved the shard, and vanished back into shadow. Dragovich's eyes flickered upward. The vast hall's many alcoves loomed above, each one a potential nest for more machines. He leaned back uneasily. Bornwolf spoke. I thank you for your rescue. You owed us little, given our recent conflict, yet you risked much to find us. But you have never explained how you knew of our distress. Preacher Lucia Gratner gave a disarming smile. Shortly after your departure from Manifold Dawn, there was an attempt on Servo Prime Cognitron for Rufus's life. We intercepted it. In reviewing the assassin's route, we learned a device may have been placed aboard your cruiser. Beornwolf nodded. A siphon bomb, yes. It failed, for the most part, but you came after us to aid? Of course, said Lucia. Sinwolf fixed her with a hard stare. Convenient, some might ask if you followed only to ensure it worked. Dragovich bristled, but Lucia stilled him with a hand. Clearly we did not. But I understand your suspicion, considering what the Five-Tower cult renegades attempted. Sinwolf glanced at Grimhelm. The other captain gave a slight shrug, flashing battle sign for could be true. Dornstall lifted his flask. It's good you did. On behalf of Sarathar, I thank you. The commissar sneered in silence. Bornwolf turned his helm slightly. For the table's record, your own part in this? Dornstall looked to Captain Mandalik, who nodded before continuing. The Lex Marshal and Inquisitor Malinovska devised a plan. After interrogating the Sarathar Council, we discovered they were trafficking Imperial prisoners, dissidents opposed to the Council of Novaterra. These prisoners vanished into the Reach, traded for wealth with the Drakari. We learned they were sent to the arenas of Elfscathia. Commissar Ongeren's lip curled at the memory, though he held his tongue. So, Dornstall continued, we took the Tenebris Lex to follow one of the transports, hoping to find both the captives and the Xeno stronghold. Captain Mandalik spoke up. We were ambushed by the Shadowfang. The Tenebris Lex was destroyed. We had no option but surrender. We weren't aboard when it went down, added Ranjan nervously, eyes shifting across the Astartes around him. We'd already entered the hulk through a torpedo tube. We made our way to the city inside. Dornstall nodded. We were breaking the prisoners from their pens when we encountered the Revenants. The rest you know. Edric leaned forward. I am sorry for the loss of your ship. I will see you and your survivors return to Sarathar. At last the commissar spoke, his voice sharp. Would never have happened if these men had done their duty from the start. As for Sarathar, it is a den of traitors, siding with the Council. Better they rot. Dornstall looked stricken. Mandalik spat. Most of my crew died for this cause. Some fell in the arenas. Have some respect, or gratitude. Ongeren stood abruptly, drawing a last pistol. Heroic traitor! Dragovich lunged to shield Lucia. Ranjan darted to cover Mandalik. Dornstall had his bolt pistol half drawn. Gastward Cuthhelm raised a single hand. The commissar's pistol erupted into witchfire, the metal twisting, forcing him to drop it. You will show respect in the Emperor's name, Deacon Absalon thundered, his voice carrying such force that even the Revenants shifted in surprise. Red pinpoints flared suddenly across Ongeren's coat, scores of targeting beams from hidden alcoves above. Dornstall, too, found his chest marked until he laid his pistol back down on the stone. At once the dots winked out. The room settled. Ongeren slumped back into his throne. My apology. You apologize only because you failed, Beornwolf said coldly. He turned to Dornstall. Do you seek justice, Lexmech? Dornstall shook his head, resting his hands on the table. Beornwolf looked back to the commissar. I understand your feelings, but these men sought justice. You missed your aim, and still you drew steel. I expect better judgment and better understanding from those who serve the Emperor. Ongeren's eyes shone wet with anger and old grief. From you, an Astartes who treats with the Council? The chamber froze. Smiles and grimaces alike fell still. Even the sound of dripping water seemed to stop. Dragovich's gaze darted to Lucia. She merely smiled faintly and turned her eyes back to the argument. Beornwolf did not move. His voice carried authority that filled the hall. I care not a damn whether the High Lords or the Novaterrans prevail. I serve the Imperium. The people of the Imperium. The galaxy is full of horrors that would erase us all, yet men tear each other apart over dogma. He shifted, pulling another shard of splinter glass from his armor and setting it before the commissar. "Save your wrath for the true enemy." He gestured towards the deacon, the preacher, the arbits. "Leave soul and law to those who were made for it, and when you need the Emperor's angels, we will be here." Ongeren lowered his head, beaten and silent. Beornwulf let the moment pass, then spoke. "So, to put matters in order, the prisoner transfers through Sarathar are beneficial for both sides. I have already sent word to General Travaux. Admiral Amun Keltrax concurs. From this day, the Navis Astra Wigathine will assume control of the transfers. With Nova Terra now holding much of the Reach's border, fighting is shifting to other sectors. The flow of prisoners will decline. That leaves your men, Commissar Ongeren. I can offer passage for you and any who wish to leave the Reach, carried into ultramar space aboard our convoys. Or you may remain, but flooding the forges with trained soldiery would not be considered suitable." Preacher Lucia Gratner inclined her head in silent agreement. Beornwulf continued. "However, there is a world in the Nitwortha system, Drakendelve, little more than a squat mining site sparsely held. You and your troops may establish a colony there and use it as staging ground until Imperial need calls again." Edric and Grimhelm exchanged faint smiles, understanding but saying nothing. Ongeren blinked, taken aback. "In your star system?" "Yes," Edric said evenly. "And do not fear. The Navis Astra Wigathin are stationed here alongside Battlefleet Revenantis." Admiral Dragovich shifted uneasily in his seat. Lucia kept her counsel, but her mind worked quickly, tracing the implications. Ongeren finally nodded. "I will put it to the men, but thank you. It would be of great aid." He paused. "You say there is no colony there?" Sinwulf replied. "A starport only. We use it for training." Edric added, "Archmagos Voratrix and Magos Tiberius will see to the Mechanicus side, weapons, equipment, a proper forge, all you will need." "An imperial jurisdiction?" asked Ongeren carefully. Beornwulf gestured to Absalon. "Drakendelve will be administrated by the Adeptus Ministorum," the deacon said smoothly. "Not by Nitwortha directly. It is Astartes Protectorate, not province. Mechanicus oversight will be minimal, and should questions arise from the Navis Imperialis, the matter is at arm's length." Ongeren inclined his head. "We will accept, Lord." Admiral Dragovich cleared his throat. "Very civilized, but there is one last matter, one that concerns Manifold Dawn." Beornwulf looked at him. "Which is the wreck of the Obscurum Fati." The circle turned toward him. "Manifold Dawn possesses the dockyards and expertise to bring such a vessel back to life. We therefore request it be readied for our fleet's retrieval." "Finders keepers," Grimhelm snapped. Dragovich ignored him. "Clearly, as the primary Imperial fleet in the Reach, the vessel is best placed in our hands. After all, we already have the Astrum Dias." Edric leaned forward. "The Eclipse of Destiny is the Void Revenants battle barge. The claim is staked." Dragovich forced a smile. "Your chapter has no need, not with our fleet to aid you, and you have done much damage to our navy of late." A murmur rippled, but he raised a hand. "Understandable. And Manifold Dawn bears no ill will, but ceding the relic would compensate us for losses." Preacher Lucia watched carefully. She saw Beornwulf flick a finger. A servo skull darted into motion toward the doorway. She followed it with her senses, and felt minds approaching. Old, heavy, calculating. She sank back into her seat and closed her eyes. The point was already moot. Beornwulf raised a silencing hand. "The Revenants hold the claim. You are not in a position to dispute it." Dragovich smiled thinly. "I am not certain the other Forge Worlds will be pleased with this fishbowl system gaining a warship of such magnitude. It could raise concern." Beornwulf grinned back, lifting a hand. 3 captains rose, saluted, and marched from the hall. Dragovich opened his mouth to press further, but Lucia placed a hand on his arm, and he stilled. He turned toward the doorway and froze. Archmagos Pyrovox of Incoloris entered first, mechadendrites swaying. Beside him, Magos Logi Serena, deputy of Archmagos Centauri of Grimness. And flanking them, Merchant Prince Hālgengas of Castel, his robes of office heavy with gilt chains. Dragovich's throat worked as he swallowed, suddenly dry. Pyrovox clapped his augmetic hands together. "I think it's a wonderful idea," he declared brightly, striding past Dragovich to Lucia's side. "Imagine how busy Archmagos Voratrix will be over the next decade. trying to rebuild that wreck into something space-worthy, and how rich our forges will become, refitting it. And of course, with a Ministorum colony to establish on Draken Delve, our tithes will naturally need adjustment. He grinned broadly. Merchant Prince Hālgengas' eyes lit at the word. Ah, tithes reduced. Quite right, quite right. He approached eagerly. Magos Logi Serena flicked through data, cogitator implants clicking, redistribution of costings, an 8.3% reduction to all our levies spread across the sector, approximately 1.5 billion tons of product over 10 years. Pyrovox's metallic eyes turned on Lucia, his grin wide. Wouldn't you say, preacher? Lucia opened her eyes slowly to find his gaze fixed on her. She smiled thinly. I hear your convoys are no longer harried. A relief, surely? Pyrovox's grin widened. And I hear you lost your monastery, your refueling station, and 10 colonies. His vox crackled into laughter. That's what happens when one lets pirates run rampant, lady. Lucia looked to the admiral and gave the faintest nod. Dragovich relented. His jaw tightened. Manifold Dawn withdraws its claim on the relic Hulk. As Pyrovox passed Preacher Lucia, he leaned close and whispered, voice a rasp of vox static through steel lips. Did you truly think the forges would let you get your grubby hands on another grand battleship? Lucia, calm as a serpent, bent her head toward his. Instead, you gave it to the Revenants, she breathed. Pyrovox's grin widened, polished brass teeth glimmering. The Revenants tore down your monastery without losing a single warrior, and you fear a relic junk pile. Lucia bowed her head as if accepting the barb as a compliment, then struck back. Now imagine those same warriors with their own Astrum Dias. For a heartbeat, Pyrovox's smile faltered. He considered her words, then gave the smallest bow, as though conceding a point he did not wish to admit. The admiral, who had been leaning forward to catch their exchange, added sharply, the monastery was renegade, and so was the fleet. Manifold Dawn would never threaten Incoloris. Pyrovox narrowed his ocular lenses, the glow dimming like a predator fixing its gaze. As you say, Lord Admiral, but should you need replacements, my forge possesses vast shipyards. We could offer an acceptable price. Dragovich sneered. Manifold Dawn does not fly dung beetles. The Archmagos inclined his head, too controlled to bristle, and moved past without further comment. The other two representatives claimed vacant thrones. Magos Logi Serena observed the chamber with a cold eye. All places equal. Efficiency is increased without hierarchy, she stated flatly. Prince Hālgengas leaned closer to her with a merchant's smile. These barbarian warlords do not understand the fine etiquette of rank, lady, but it is always best to play along. They appreciate flattery. Flotward Edric, seated nearby, gave him a wry nod. Flattery accepted, Prince Hālgengas. Logi Serena tilted her head. Archmagos Voratrix is not present? Edric leaned back, raising his voice so all could hear. This council is for the Forge representatives on behalf of the peoples of the Reach and of the Void Revenants. We already hold agreement with Voratrix. Beyond that, the deacon speaks with closest authority. In truth, Voratrix had pressed to attend, but both Bornwolf and Edric had agreed to exclude her. Wolfgar's counsel had been plain. Had Voratrix come, the Forges might have broken into rivalry before the first oath was spoken. Her greatest flaw was not incompetence, but her uncanny gift for kindling discord among her equals. At the far side of the table, Deacon Absalon leaned toward Gastward Cuthelm, speaking low so only the psyker heard. They circle like hawks over carrion, each one wanting their share. Can you feel it, brother? Cuthelm's gaze lingered on Dragovich, then on Pyrovox, then on Hālgengas' greedy smile. His voice was taut. Yes, tension, suspicion, hunger, but beneath it all, the same fear, security. None trust the others. Each dreads being left weak while another grows strong. Absalon exhaled through his nose, clasping his Aquila rod more firmly. Then we must be the mortar, binding these stones together before they crack apart. Cuthelm inclined his head in agreement, though unease prickled his skin. Skop Wolfgar raised his Crozius from the table. The gathering settled, green lenses glowing faintly within his skull helm as he inclined it to the delegates. He set the weapon down in silence. Eagle heads angled outward. It was Chapter Master Bornwolf's decision to summon you here, Wolfgar intoned, gesturing around the circle. Representatives of Manifold Dawn, Preacher Gratner, Admiral Dragovich, Warrant Officer Dornstall of Sarathar, Arbitz Lexmek Ranjan, Captain Mandalik, Magos, Logi, Serena, Merchant Prince Hālgengas, you are all known to one another. We thank you for answering. Logi Serena tilted her head, Vox grill buzzing. We were not offered a choice. Your summons was adamant. Harrigan smiled easily, rings glittering as he steepled his hands. We of Castell are always willing to come where security and profit might be discussed. And money, muttered Pyrovox, folding his mechadendrite smugly. Castell still has holdings within the Arcana Inclusium, stated Harrigan, his rings glinting as he waved a hand theatrically. I only hope that if the Revenants intend to seize these, as they did the 10 worlds of Manifold Dawn, we might come to a financial arrangement rather than conflict. Pyrovox's optics dimmed with amusement. Mine's not paying well, then? Your worlds are yours, Edric interjected firmly. But if you wish to divest, Lady Voratrix may be persuaded to buy. Those worlds belong to Forge Grimness, snapped Logi Serena. By rights, they should be returned. Harrigan raised his brows, smirking. You abandoned them, to orcs and pirates. Castell alone sent ships to defend them. His voice dropped to a mocking murmur. And funny, none of the colonists ever wished to return to Grimness. Curious that, perhaps they preferred freedom to servitor shackles? He chuckled at his own joke. Serena's face tightened, voice cutting like a blade. It is a wonder Castell produced anything, given how your forges wallow in pleasure. Dornstall muttered into his flask, just loud enough. Wasn't the Trivona malady your attempt to placate workers with pleasures of the debauched? Serena rounded on him. Know your place, Constable. That was the work of a cult. Do not lay it on the forge masters. Dornstall leaned back, unscrewing the flask with studied indifference. Pyrovox let the exchange hang, as though it did not concern him. As for myself, he said at last, I was passing through anyway, when we caught the Raven's signal. Adric smiled faintly. Hrefn, the name of his old patrol ship, now tradition among Revenant couriers. Pyrovox continued, and Forge in Caloris is always gracious in answering any request from the great Forge of Nitwertha. Yes, you should keep close, Admiral Dragovich cut in, his tone like drawn steel. Your dung beetle fleet could never stand against pirates. At least the Navis Astra Wigathine fly ships with names of renown. Pyrovox's grin sharpened. Yes, I heard 2 of those fine names were found frozen in ice. Coolant failure, was it? Edric lifted a hand, forcing the room back to order. The border war is ended. The renegade fleet is broken. The Sarathar affair is under Arbite's oversight. Each word fell heavy as stone. When Logi Serena sneered at Dornstall, the Arbite's warrant officer calmly produced his flask, while Ranjan stammered but stood firm. By High Lord Warrant, I am the highest surviving authority of Sarathar, he declared, voice quivering but resolute. That places me at this table, by right. Dornstall offered the flask to the Logi. What rank are you again, Lady Serena? Works and monuments? She fell to silence. Well played, Pyrovox whispered, amusement curling through his vox. The hall grew heavy with stormlight as Edric named the 3rd point, the fall of Elfscathia, the death of Valeth and his witches, the Arcana Inclusium secured. For a moment, even the rain hushed. Bjornwolf leaned forward, armor shrieking in protest, battle scars plain on its ceramite. He hated their stares, scholars, traitors, zealots, older, more cunning than him. Yet the moment had come. As of now, he said, voice low but iron, the Imperium is at war with itself, not over faith nor land, but over thrones. I care nothing for their quarrels, but I know this. Alone we are weak, together we endure. As barbarians we speak plain, and so I say this. I propose an oath. He set both scarred hands on the table. Not rule, not tribute, but bond. If any forge or world in the Reach is in danger, all here are sworn to aid. No exceptions. Harrigan leaned forward, eyes bright. A noble vow, chapter master, but oaths are chains. Who will bind them? Bornwolf turned slowly toward them. All who keep the oath are bound. His voice rumbled through Vox grill and storm. All who break it are forfeit. The delegates looked to one another in silence. The storm outside groaned against the high windows. Rain hissed down the stone walls in rivulets. Pyrovox's grin widened, but behind the lenses his thoughts raced. He heard Bornwolf's voice. Yet in it, he recognized Yuna's words. She had done it. This oath did not make the Revenants overlords of the Reach. It made the Reach bind itself. Each forge, each fleet, each proud domain now responsible for another. A net of chains drawn tight. unity conjured from discord. He chuckled softly, then laid a heavy augmetic hand upon the cold stone table. Prince Hālgen, seeing the trap and the opportunity both, hesitated only a moment before following suit. His rings scraped the stone as his palm pressed flat. Magos Logi Serena's optics flickered with a dozen calculations. Logic brooked no other path. A cybernetic limb stretched forward and touched the oath stone. Captain Mandalik exchanged a look with Dornstall. The Lexmech officer gave a terse nod and placed his flask hand flat. Mandalik added his own gloved palm beside it. Preacher Lucia Gratner closed her eyes, lips moving in some silent catechism, and set her hand down like a votive offering. Admiral Dragovich, jaw set, followed without a word. Lastly, Commissar Ongren hovered, the back of his neck slick with sweat. Ongren's hand hovered above the stone, but did not yet descend. His sharp eyes, shadowed beneath the peaked cap, scanned each of the delegates. "You speak of unity," he said, voice clipped and cold. "But what of those who already bend knee to Nova Terra? What of the Council forces entrenched on Sarathar? Swear this oath, and you bind yourselves to traitors as much as to brothers. Tell me, Lord Bjornwolf, are we to clasp hands with those who would see the Emperor's throne broken in two?" The room shifted uneasily, murmurs rising like the first sparks of a blaze. Pyrovox's optics glowed faintly as if amused. Preacher Lucia raised a delicate brow but said nothing, letting the silence weigh. It was Dornstall who answered, his tone measured. "The RBTs remain. The tithe is still paid to both Terra and Nova. The Reach cannot afford to be sundered again by the quarrels of distant lords. This oath is not allegiance to one throne or another. It is survival." The Commissar's fingers trembled above the stone. Then, with a whispered curse, he pressed them flat to the surface. The chamber seemed to exhale, the storm's howl surging through cracked shutters as if to witness. "The oath is sworn," intoned Skop Wolfgar, lifting his Crozius until the twin eagles caught the firelight. "May it be our shield and our chain."